Day 599 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 287,000 military personnel losses, which includes an additional 880 losses in the past day, and just for reference, the previous day's losses were upwards of 970. Then we'll take a look at the hardware losses, so 8 tanks, 25 APVs, and 33 artillery. Always a lot of artillery. But here's where it's now starting to get interesting, as Russian and Ukrainian artillery firing rates have hit parity for the first time since this war began. And as you can see here, Russian firing rates have fallen from previous average quarterly highs of 63,000 shells per day down to 7,000 shells per day now. All in what is a very obvious downwards trend for the Russian army there, whereas we can start to see an upwards trend for the AFU, which is as a result of international aid and manufacturing, but also from Ukrainian homegrown manufacturing as well. So slow and steady has really won the artillery race in this case. But the mass irony here is that of when your biggest strength becomes your biggest weakness, as artillery firepower has always been one of Russia's biggest strengths. And all of these figures, they're only logical, as Russia themselves said that they're hoping to achieve production rates of up to 2 million shells per annum into the new year. Mathematically, of which calculates out to be just 5k per day. So as we can see here, they've used up their existing or previous stocks that were sitting out at about 15 to 20 million. But they did more or less just indiscriminately use them all up. Then we'll head across to the map for the day. So as you can see, Russia has really never any shortage of fires. And today we saw one at the capital of Moscow. Now, according to some preliminary information, some warehouses are on fire there. Then we head over to the border oblasts of Russia, as explosions were reported, as Russia's defense ministry said that its forces shot down all 27 Ukrainian drones overnight on October 15th over the Belgorod and Kursk regions. And this is actually out of the norm for them to state. They usually say 2 or 3 were shot down. All 2 or 3 were neutralized. However, this is exactly the case when we move all the way down to Sochi, still in southern Russia. As in this instance, the Russian MOD stated air defenses shot down all 2 drones near the region, but these claims could not be independently verified either. In fact, pro-Kremlin Russian Telegram channel MASH cited residents saying they heard 5 or 6 explosions followed by power outages in some of the region. But the MOD never stated anything about electricity cutoffs. So here we see another example of on-the-ground reports that are naturally incompatible with government reports once again. Then we'll head across to the Ukrainian map today into the northern Donbass region, as the Russian army resumed offensive actions towards Makivka in the north, that is, and all along to the Kupiansk direction. But as for the outcome to this, the Ukrainian Defense Forces continued to hold back the Russian offensives in the region, repelling more than 5 enemy attacks. Then we'll head down to Avdiivka today, as the Russian offensive around the town has been ongoing for 4 days now. And what I see now is just a stream of more and more photos and videos showing Russian vehicles simply being blown up. Vuhledar 2.0. But it's not over yet, and Russia will still throw its resources into this bottomless pit, although it doesn't really look like sensible warfare. But no pictures describe the Russian situation to me better than this picture, with Ukrainian TM-62 anti-tank mines scattered around but not camouflaged, and yet Russian armor still runs over it. The sheer level of incompetence is actually quite breathtaking. Or put another way, these are severely undertrained Russian personnel, or tankies for instance, pushed to the front storm assault groups. And it's situations like these, which is exactly why it doesn't make sense for Ukraine to agree to a ceasefire and concede lost territory, because Russia will just build back up and train up over a period of 12 months, all for a better round number two. But instead, the reality, of course, is such that there is no ceasefire, and Russian forces are forced to plug the gaps and make some horrendous mistakes in the process. And as a result of examples like this, there's a Russian military telegram channel by the name of Morozov, so a Russian nationalist who's been serving with the LNR army since 2014, who has been doing a little bit of what they call doom posting, much like Igor Gherkin used to do. As Morozov talks about the strength of the Ukrainian fortifications in the area, the lack of precision of Russian artillery where quantity does not translate into quality. And he talks about a serious chance of Russian generals being tempted to or forced into en masse assaults that lead to major losses with no results. He also mentioned a lot of problems with the Russian artillery, so the actual shells themselves, where crews are receiving differently weighted 152mm variants, which is problematic when you're trying to actually aim them from artillery systems. It's all about vectors and weights. Probably not that matters much anyway, given that the barrels are so worn out and so imprecise. But also he said that they come with no powder or chemical propellant material therein. So not an easy situation all round for them there. There was also a Russian female influencer, and this happened a couple of days ago now, but I want to pop it in quickly, speaking of the Avdiivka blunders. So she was literally making an appeal to whoever can afford it to purchase body bags, saying that Russian forces really need them and that there is a huge deficit for these right now in the Donetsk Oblast, which is where Avdiivka is located. So it is an embarrassing admission for the Russian forces there, naturally. Now, in terms of the map a little bit further, Russia continued its best to push on the northern and southern flanks once again. Frontline positions not really changed at all. And on the southern flank, we saw various instances of Russian hardware losses, including a T-72 tank with a wicked cope cage and a BTR-80 armored personnel carrier destroyed in the process, and another BTR-80 APC in the background, damaged also on that one. But really, what the Russian forces are actually dealing with here is one large 20-kilometer concrete fortress with bunkers made of concrete so thick even artillery is not able to penetrate them, with networks of underground tunnels built within, not to mention heavily mined of an area, which is effectively what they might sometimes call an area of denial tactic employed on the ground. Oh, but also, at least 8 kilometers or 5 miles behind Avdiivka, we're talking due east of Avdiivka, here we saw a bridge, or former bridge, in the Russian-occupied territory that was not only destroyed by presumably a HIMARS strike, but it also took out a Russian T-80 tank and MRAP and a towed artillery piece in the process. Oh, not to mention it blocked the railway lines underneath it as well. And given that this leads directly to the Avdiivka front, I strongly suspect that this was a target waiting in the wings by the Ukrainian army for a strike at just the right time. And well-timed targets of this caliber have certainly happened before. We've seen it quite a bit. It was certainly by design to make for a negative impact on Russian offensive operations, 100%. Then somewhere in the east, I'll just briefly mention that today the AFU forces wiped out another enemy Su-25 fighter jet in the region. And then now we'll move down briefly to the south today as Russian units unsuccessfully tried to restore recently lost positions, just to the east of Robotyne, which is roughly where we can see Ukraine's freshly minted land liberations to the west of the town recently. And so certainly something of note in this southern region in the last day was for example, the loss of a Russian TOS-1A multiple rocket launcher, which is this platform often referred to as a flamethrower due to the heavy devastation that it can cause. So during a reconnaissance operation in the Zaporizhia region, another drone went in for the hit, which then completely incinerated the vehicle. And the size of the explosion is a dead giveaway that the TOS-1A was loaded with ammunition and therefore was about to open fire. So it very much appears that the Ukrainian forces got to that one in the nick of time. Then we'll head across to some news for today, slightly shorter video perhaps. We'll see at the end, but so here we go. So start off with some, just a little bit, so Russian hardware, Ruski hardware. So you've heard me speak about the BTR-82 APC, or Armored Personnel Carrier, before, and the BTR-80 as well, which I just in fact mentioned a moment ago. But now Russia has upgraded to the BTR-50 APC, as in from thereabouts 1950. For the production date. And in fact, it was used as part of the Russian Avdiivka operations in the last couple of days. 70-year-old rust bucket hardware. Now, I actually reported on these ancient rust buckets a few months ago when a photo saw them spotted in a warehouse somewhere in either Russia or Ukraine, but they were never seen in the field until now, upside down. And I love the online Russian bot argument that states that Russia is saving their best stuff till last. Although, to be fair, it seems like they had to stop, or they appeared to stop saying that, using that line from about, earlier 2023, earlier this year. But I would actually say the opposite is true. They've been forced to save their worst stuff till last. Then moving across to some more news, so a senior Russian diplomat, was found dead at a hotel in Turkey. Now, reports have suggested that Nikolai Krobrinets died of a heart attack after checking into a hotel in the Turkish city of Istanbul. But no matter what way you choose to spin it, this is unfortunately only one mysterious death in a long line of mysterious Russian deaths that have accelerated exponentially right after Russia's invasion into Ukraine last year. All in what's very likely to be as a result of the highest levels of the Russian government who are stamping out on dissent amongst their ranks. Then moving on to a little bit of a lighter segment. So I just like seeing this type of footage really. Ukrainian soldiers looking to cook some really nicely, or rather wholesome meals, and getting fed well. And that of which, as we've seen, has certainly been in just stark contrast to Russian-provided MREs, aka ready-to-eat meals, such as the liquefied meat water that Russians had no intention of eating or drinking. Then in a final quick funny to round it all off with today, guys, so the new Tinder reality in Russia. So 22-year-old Dasha from St. Petersburg is looking for a husband, stating that a contract to war is mandatory, and apart from that, quote, nothing else matters. And good for her, trying to beat the system, a larder digger, if you will. And of course, she'll only get the deceased military husband payout if her husband is actually shown or listed to be dying from military conflict within Ukraine, as opposed to how many Russians instead get very erroneously listed as, or inaccurately as, deserters or simply MIA, missing in action. But even then, if none of that's the case, there's still a fair chance that the Russian government won't shell out for the deceased payment and give her a sack of potatoes or carrots instead. I mean, we have seen this before, so it is likely. Russia's got to make budget cuts somewhere. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit the like button, check out my other channel in the comments below, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.